put obstacles. And why did they accept that recently before the incident, and when they arrive, the attack happened? Second, you cannot use it in a city where you can have tens of thousands of casualties, including the army. The most important thing, nobody verified the veracity of the videos and the photos. No one. Because in many places, the same picture of the same children used in different photos in different places. And you can have those pictures on the internet. They've been circulating on the internet. On the other side, we have evidences like, concrete evidences like the materials and the containers that the terrorists used. We had the confession of some of the terrorists that conveyed chemical materials from neighboring countries. And you have the indications that the interest of whoever committed this crime wasn't the Syrian army, it was the terrorists. So
is there even the slightest chance or possibility that someone inside your circle or the army did it against your permission, against you, and then maybe we'll see him defeat in a few months? I don't know. It's a very complicated crisis, so we're allowed to do speculations.
It's a weapon of mass destruction. It's a chemical. It's like if you say that somebody in a nuclear country wanted to use nuclear weapon without the authority of his master. You cannot believe. This is a very naive story. This could be a children's story. It's not a grenade. You put it in your pocket, you throw it whenever you want. The process of using the chemical weapons, if you have a war with any enemy, and if you want to use it, it's very complicated. It's under strict procedure, because technically, it's complicated technically, first of all, to activate the material itself. This is the second. Not a single unit in the Syrian army has chemical weapon anyway. You have specialized unit, and if you want to use it, these specialized units should join the army in order to use the chemical weapon. So again, this is children's narrative.
No way.
Yeah.
So, since we're going back in time, let's go at the beginning of the crisis. At that time, you acted in a very tough way against any sign of opposition. Do you have any kind of regret of the way everything began?
We have to define the word tough, because we dealt with the situation according to the Constitution. It's like if you say the Americans sent the army in Los Angeles in 1995. Do you call it tough, or do you call they sent the army to find the rebels? So according to the Constitution, we should have fought the terrorists, because for the very first week, we have many victims from the army and the police. For the very first few weeks. So that's normal. Well, what we did according to the Constitution, this is the job of the government. If you talk about mistakes committed on the ground, that could happen anywhere in the world. In UK, a few years ago, they shot a Brazilian guy by mistake. So that could happen anywhere. So policy is different from the practice in many places in the world.
But just remaining on the political field,
yeah.
Don't you think that you had the chance to do something more at the time, like
yeah.
doing something more that could maybe change? You know, even politicians sometimes can admit some mistakes here or there.
Even if you want to look at your mistakes when you do it, and every human would do mistakes every day.
Sure.
That's normal. But how can you judge your mistake after the end of the event, not during the event? So we are still in the middle of the crisis. You can judge that at the end of the crisis. This is where you can revise our action. This is where the people can criticize us on, let's say, objective and methodical basis, not arbitrary way, not in arbitrary way.
Did you ever think to leave the power for the sake of your country? Did you ever consider the chance to leave your country just if the exchange was peace and stability for your people?
It depends on the if. If my quit of my position would make the situation better, the answer very simply, without reluctance, yes. But the other question, would that be the situation? That's another question. So for me as president, so far, I have to be in my position, because when you have a storm, you don't give up, your position. You don't quit your position and leave your country in the middle of the storm. Your mission is to take your country to the shore, not to abandon the sheep and the Syrian people.
What could be the scenario in which you could decide that it's the right way for your ship to go to the shore, and then you decide to do something else?
Yeah, the first part, two things. As I said earlier, the political dialogue is very important to discuss the future of Syria and the political system. The second one is to stop the violence by stopping the smuggling and sending the terrorists from outside Syria, stopping the financial support, stopping sending them armaments and every logistical support. Because if we don't succeed here, we cannot succeed in the political part of solving the problem. This first. Second, after solving this problem regarding me, my position, the only way is the ballot box. Because this is where the Syrian people can tell whoever they want. And for me, I should obey whatever the Syrian people want. There's no other way in any country. I mean, it's not the decision of any group in Syria. It's the decision of every Syrian citizen.
Are you going to be in the elections of 2014?
Before the election, right away, if I feel that the Syrian people wants me to be in that position, I will run. If not, I will not.
Mr. President, I do remember the beginning of your presidency, and you were looked as a symbol of hope for Syria, because everybody knew that you knew the word and you came here to give it more modern society, open. Intellectuals, young people were looking at you in this way. Then something happened in between. Do you think there's a chance you could do something so dramatically different to be seen again in that position and not in the one in which you're seen in the very last days?
You have to talk about internal factors and external factors, because we're part of the very complicated region in the world. So we will be affected, and there's daily interactions with our periphery. The internal factor, which is that when you talk about reform, it's not the reform of the president or the government. The government and the president should lead the reform, but it's about the whole society, because it's a matter of culture. It's not only laws and constitution. The laws and constitutions are means for the change, but the real change happens by the people themselves. So according to our reality, when you talk about thousands of years of civilization, you are talking about mores and customs and the traditions and ethos and folkways and different things that related to every society. And our society is very complicated because of this multifarious culture that we've had. So it was moving forward. You cannot say that we didn't do anything. Some people say that it was fast. Some people say that it was too slow. This is subjective. Each one see it in his own way. But at the end, no one can say that we are in our position, because we moved forward, could be slowly but surely. This is the first part. Second, you have to talk about external obstacles. When I became president, 2 months later, the Intifada in Palestine started. That influenced every country in the Arab world. The peace process actually has failed just a few months before I became president, and there was stalemate. 11th of September happened, and we have to pay the price. One of the countries that has to pay the price. They invaded Afghanistan, we were against. They invaded Iraq, we were against. And after 2003, after the invasion of Iraq, Syria had to pay the price, and there was embargo by the European and the West, and so on. There was only a period of, let's say, artificial period of conciliation, let's say, between Syria, which is not could be not the very precise word, but kind of rapprochement again between Syria and the Western, especially Europeans, between 2008 and 2011. Why artificial? Because it was under the supervision of the Americans. It wasn't genuine, because they weren't independent. So, and now we have the crisis. When you talk about reform, especially when you talk about dramatic reform, you need different atmosphere. You have to be comfortable economically, politically, and ideologically. Don't forget, in that regard, one of the external and internal factor at the same time, is the invasion of the bad ideologies to the region, including Syria. And I mean the ideology of Al-Qaeda that invaded many communities in our region, including part of the Syrian society. You cannot talk about reform and democracy while the ideologies are single-minded ideologies that don't accept any other one. Because democracy, real democracy, is about accepting the other. Started by accepting the other, first of all, especially in diverse society. So I can say that we are still having the same will to move forward in that regard according to our realities. So the scope of the reform will be limited by our realities.
Very last question. If now that the major threat looks to be over or a little distant, what would you tell your people in terms of, promise and pattern?
I think the only thing that I can say now is one option that's left for us is to defend our country. So first of all, we have to focus on getting rid of the terrorists and the terrorism and their ideology. Second, even if we get over this crisis, we have so many things to manage after the crisis, what's the leftover of this crisis, especially the ideological, the psychological, and the social consequences of this society. So we have a lot of work, but I can say with confidence that we can make Syria much better than before the crisis.
Even with reforms that
people
of course.
Was asking? We need the reform. We need. Without reform, we cannot. The reform is a very important part of what I'm talking about. Actually is the major axe of making Syria better. That's for sure. But doesn't mean to be the hope in that regard of the foreign countries or foreign people. I could be the hope of the Syrian, not any other one.
I wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for your time and for hosting us here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to Syria.